Yeah, that's right. Right.
I tell you what, I just have to stop looking at the standings. Every time I look at the standings, they start losing, so. Or maybe I just need to not go to MLB.com and look at the standings. Maybe that's what the problem is. Well, I want to thank everybody for bearing with us. But if we could get everybody to migrate back to their seats.
Okay, got it.
We will go ahead and reconvene our work session on the 2015 budget. And Larry had the floor. Larry had a question. I think that Laura, you've got an answer for the councilman.
I do. Let me go back for just a minute. Councilman Bodovich and Councilman Shuda have expressed that they'd like to. When will the book come? So let me go back for just a minute. As a reminder, so the priority-based budgeting is developed in phases. I'm going to address a few things here at the same time. It is a best practice because what we had before didn't involve stakeholder input. It was created by staff and reviewed by the governing body, and your input came at the end. Priority-based budgeting stakeholder input never ends. We take it all the time, every day, from everyone. I will also address that this meeting date, this calendar was built in January, based on the statutory process and backed up from when the public hearing was and when the newspaper publishes its newspapers and getting all the requirements for the statutory process. We are actually ahead of what we used to do for the process, and we're ahead of many municipalities, and the only ones that are running neck and neck with us is Johnson County. So we still have a month before adoption, and because the input and the evaluation and the monitoring and the adjustments never end, you always have the ability, if you had something really large that you wanted to change, you can always republish and amend the budget. There is a statutory process for that. So input never stops, but input was not part of our old way of doing things. Stakeholder input was not included. So I just wanted to remind you of that. So with that being said, remember that one of my slides was we need to come back to some components tonight regarding high performance and merit and cost of living. So let me go one more time. The things that we did besides stakeholder input, these also were budget meetings. April 7th, a review of your 2013 fund balances, and we also discussed some of the major assumptions for property values, and I presented Mr. Welcome's property appraisal evaluation, and we talked about fund balances. We talked about the things that matter. We're bringing every piece of it to you, every step of the way, all throughout the year. You are getting your input and the stakeholder input for every material item in the budget. We've talked about staffing, we've talked about reorganization, we're getting ready to ask for your input on merit and COLA, the department initiatives, we've talked about trending and tracking and setting the expenditures. Maximum level is set from the city administrator's proposed budget. So you have all of that in front of you, and we've talked about all of these, every one of those meetings where there was a budget meeting and there was one before that. So, and there will be more.
And I know at the April work session, I believe we talked about reaffirming our long-term goals, our four
strategic goals,
our
right.
4 stated goals to continue into this budget session as well. and going forward, those are something that can be addressed or changed,
You bet.
as needed.
Yep.
But we established back in April that yes,
Are these
our
general?
long-term goals, these four
Right.
goals, are still our primary goals. And then, I think we talked about, short-term goals in the form of initiatives at the June 2nd meeting.
Mhm. So, with that being said, direct answer to your question, once we get through tonight, because I'm going to be asking for your consensus direction on some things, because these are still components we need to finish building the budget. I just showed you the faces of a high-performance staff. We will grind off it as fast as we possibly can and bring you a book for your review in adequate time prior to the August 4th approval. I cannot tell you when until we know where we're going with this, but I can tell you we'll go as fast as we possibly can.
Don't you think the right way would just be put in what you think we've agreed to over the past 6 months or whatever that time frame was, and then just hand us the book early on? I mean, why are we even printing the book if we don't get it until, as you said, we approve the budget? I think
Because that's
what you
actually the
said.
guide for 2015. That is your policy statement. When you approve August 4th budget for 2015, what's produced and you approved is your policy playbook, handbook, guidebook for 2015 for your departments, and your city administrator will be responsible for it.
But
And let me.
Who prints the book? It gives you just the details in a slide presentation, and it says, once you approve it, we'll give you the details. That just doesn't, I can't even believe I'm having to argue that that's backwards. Especially since, even if you discount everything you just said, we all agreed last year, you agreed, Mayor, that we would have a book to look at the details of the budget. Because in that book are trend lines, there's, things that we may see that were omitted this year, and we can ask the question, what happened to this item? Why is this number down? Why is this number up? Why is this number so vastly larger than last year's number?
That is a
Those are all
different
things
process.
that we should be informed of well before you publish it, because now it looks like when you publish it as part of the in the newspaper, it's as though we've already read it, and really isn't much discussion other than if the public wants to disagree with it or wants to point out something that they're not happy about. But I mean, what time frame is left? After you publish it, then what happens?
All we did was set the maximum expenditures by fund. That's it. There's no detail in the statutorily published. There never is. There never has been. There's no requirement. There's not even a setup to do that. It's not the detail that's published in the budget. It never has been.
Right.
But the number
And
would be,
what-
but could be lower if we looked at the details and said, you don't need this, or we're not in agreement on you providing this.
Well, yeah, we can still
Which is what
adjust
we're doing now.
how much money we spend between now and when the actual budget is published. And even then, we have control over a great amount of the detail that happens in the course of the upcoming year. And if you'll not interrupt me for a second, let me finish a thought that I've been trying to get in here since the beginning. We had a council retreat. We had an expert in high-performance governing bodies, and John Nalbandian come in from AU. And, what staff is doing here is taking policy direction from us and then putting their administrative shoulder to the grindstone to produce us something that is a reflection of the direction that we've given them. It's not getting lost in the line items. It's policy making from a big picture level. We will get a book in advance of the meeting on August 4th. We will have an opportunity to identify if there's something in there that we want to discuss. And there's governing bodies all across the country and all across the state of Kansas and all across Johnson County that may go late into the night when they're going about approving their budget, pulling things out and what have you. And if that's where we get that's where we get. But what we're doing now is following a best practice as we agreed to do in February of 2013. That this was the practice we were going to follow. We agreed to do this on the advice of our city administrator, our finance director, and Alan Gibbs and Hulick, which is the firm that does our audit for us. We're not doing anything that is improper. We are building a budget.
It's a partnership between the governing body and the citizens and your staff to use best practice for priority-based budgeting, and we have brought you all the major components every step of the way for your input, which is what I'm going back to now, because there were still two important components to be dealt with tonight, in addition to the ones that were presented.
I have a follow-up to Larry's original question, because I think that, in a sense, he and I kind of see eye to eye on this one, believe it or not. We do see eye to eye on something, and this is one of those things I think we do agree on. I think it's, when Chris talks about coming up with budget items that are reflective of the city's, of the governing body's priorities through priority-based budgeting, I completely understand the value of that. But if we don't have the information to determine whether or not the budget line items accurately reflect what we want, okay, that's where the problem lies. And last year we had 10 days to review the budget. There were transfer mechanisms in there that I didn't agree with, and I didn't like it. And it was kind of a take it or leave it proposition, at least that's the way I felt when we had the budget last year. That we had one meeting, and we had a deadline, and it's employed by statute that we have to adhere to this deadline, and I didn't feel like we had appropriate amounts of time, and understanding that we started that budget process late because of a variety of factors, not the least of which being an election in the middle of the process. But I mean, it was difficult from that perspective, and I don't want to run into that situation again where we have not enough time to be able to look at the budget, line item by line item, and determine for ourselves as the governing body whether or not it accurately reflects the strategic priorities of the city. That's really where it comes down to. It's not even necessarily a second guessing of all the decisions. I just want to make sure that we are tracking in the right direction, and that decisions that are being made administratively do truly reflect the policy priorities and the direction that the governing body is given. And that's where it comes down to for me. And that's why I have the question, that's why I do agree with Larry to a certain extent on that. Try to get the book as quickly as we can so that we have enough time to be able to make those determinations. And I don't feel like we had enough time last year.
Christie, you had something?
I guess I just want to, it seems like we're kind of getting wrapped up in this time frame, and I mean, I know, and I think Keith will speak too, the time frame for budget last year and this year is exactly the same as it's always been. It's just that in previous years, we would meet 5, 6, 7 nights a week to go through all of that detail. So
And accomplish very little.
And accomplish very little. So, I mean, the time frame is not any different. It's the same time frame that we followed. It's just the frequency and the way we went about it. And literally, it was department directors standing up here and going line by line by line. And quite frankly, we never really, I mean, as everybody can see, we never accomplished anything. There were no projects that were done. There was nothing identified.
We didn't ask for any input from any stakeholders whatsoever.
No, exactly. We didn't ask for anything. So I get wanting to go through that detail. I'm not disagreeing that should be available prior to the meeting, but I also don't want us to think that we've significantly decreased time frames, because we haven't. I mean, the time frame's the same. We're just meeting a lot less, and in my opinion, we're focusing on getting things accomplished.
You're focusing on goals.